The aircraft door sealed with a heavy thud, the sound echoing through the narrow cabin like a warning that there was no turning back. Passengers shifted in their seats, settling in for what they assumed would be an uneventful flight. The hum of electronics mixed with the low murmur of conversations as people prepared to disconnect from the world below. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Reed adjusted his headset, his posture relaxed but alert. Flying was second nature to him. 20 years in the air had taught him how to read the rhythm of a plane the way others read the weather. Marcus was one of the few black captains employed by the airline, a fact he never mentioned but always carried. He had earned every stripe on his uniform, every ounce of trust placed in him. Tonight's flight was routine, a smooth route, clear skies, no complications. At least, that was the plan. Behind him, a flight attendant stepped into the cockpit doorway. Her smile was tight, rehearsed, and her eyes darted briefly to Marcus's phone, which was resting on the console. "Captain," she said sharply, "are you on a call?" Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the tone. "Yes," he replied calmly. "Maintenance control. We had a minor alert earlier, and I'm confirming it's cleared." She frowned. "Phones aren't allowed during pre-departure procedures. This is a secured company line," Marcus said evenly. "Standard protocol." She folded her arms. "I need you to deactivate it immediately." Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "Ma'am, this is cockpit communication. It's authorized." Her jaw tightened. "You're not being honest." The words hung in the air. Marcus turned fully toward her. "Excuse me. I've seen pilots pretend to follow procedure before," she said. "You're lying, and I don't feel comfortable with this." The accusation was sudden, sharp, and loud enough for the first officer to glance up. Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the kind that came from knowing exactly what this was and how dangerous it could become. "I'm not lying," he said, "and I'd appreciate you lowering your voice." Instead, she raised it. "This call needs to be deactivated immediately," she snapped. "Or I report you." The cockpit went silent. Marcus ended the call slowly, deliberately, and set the phone down. He stood, his movements controlled, his expression calm. "You will not accuse me like that again," he said. "Is that clear?" She scoffed. "If you followed rules, I wouldn't have to." She turned and walked out. The first officer stared at Marcus. "You okay?" Marcus nodded. "Let's focus on the flight." But the damage was already done. Midway through boarding, a supervisor entered the cockpit with a tablet in hand, her expression serious. "Captain Reed," she said, "we received a report of misconduct." Marcus felt his pulse spike. "On what grounds?" "Failure to comply with communication policy," she replied. "And dishonesty." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I was on an authorized maintenance call, logged and recorded." The supervisor hesitated. "We'll need to verify." Passengers waited. The cabin buzzed with confusion. Whispers spread. Phones came out. Marcus sat back down, hands folded, anger simmering beneath the surface. He had followed every rule, every step, and still he was here, defending his integrity. Minutes later, the supervisor returned. "You were cleared," she said quietly. "The call was legitimate." Marcus nodded. "Then we can proceed." She hesitated again. "However, given the concern raised, we're assigning another captain for this flight." Marcus stared at her. "On what basis?" "Company discretion," she said, "to avoid escalation." The words landed hard. "You're grounding me," Marcus said, "for doing my job." She didn't answer. As he exited the cockpit, passengers watched. Some recognized the uniform. Some sensed something was wrong. A woman near the aisle whispered, "Why is the captain leaving?" Marcus stopped in the aisle and turned. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady, "I want you to know I was removed from this flight after being falsely accused of dishonesty while performing authorized duties." Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man stood up. "Are you serious?" "I am," Marcus replied, "and I won't be silent about it." The supervisor rushed forward. "Captain, please no," Marcus said calmly. "This matters." Passengers began speaking at once. Questions, protests, phones, recording openly now. The supervisor raised her hands. "We are reviewing the situation." "Do it honestly," someone shouted. Within minutes, Security arrived. Not for Marcus, for the situation itself. After a tense review, the airline reversed its decision. The accusation was documented as unfounded. The flight attendant was removed pending investigation. Marcus returned to the cockpit. When the plane finally took off, applause filled the cabin. Not loud, not wild, but real. As the city lights fell away beneath the wings, Marcus felt something shift. Not victory, validation. He made an announcement once they reached cruising altitude. "Thank you for your patience," he said, "and for reminding this airline that integrity matters." When the flight landed, Marcus didn't rush off. He took a moment, looking back at the cabin, at the people who had spoken up. Some flights are remembered for turbulence, others for truth, and Marcus Reed knew this one would never leave him. Marcus Reed stayed seated in the cockpit long after most passengers had deplaned. The cabin outside slowly emptied, footsteps fading down the jet bridge, voices dissolving into airport noise. The applause had ended, but its echo lingered in his chest. He stared at the instrument panel without really seeing it, replaying every second of what had happened. The accusation, the doubt, the way the room shifted when authority chose convenience over truth. He had lived moments like this before, though never so publicly. Subtle pauses when he entered briefing rooms. Extra questions about credentials that his colleagues were never asked. Compliments that sounded more like surprise than respect. He had learned early in his career that excellence was not enough. It had to be undeniable. A knock sounded at the cockpit door. "Captain Reed," a voice asked. Marcus turned. The supervisor stood there again, but this time her posture was different. Less rigid, less protected by policy. "May I come in?" she asked. Marcus nodded. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "I owe you an apology," she said. "What happened shouldn't have escalated the way it did." Marcus met her eyes. "It escalated because someone chose not to believe me." She hesitated. "The report raised concerns." "The report was false," Marcus replied, "and it was taken seriously without verification." She swallowed. "You're right." Silence stretched between them. "The airline will be conducting a formal review," she continued. "Not just of the attendant, but of how these reports are handled." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's necessary. And," she added, "your record will reflect that you were cleared immediately." "It already should have," Marcus said quietly. She nodded again, then left. Marcus exhaled and leaned back in his seat. His hands finally began to shake, the adrenaline draining from his system now that the fight was over. He wasn't angry anymore. He was tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones when you've had to prove your worth one too many times. Later, in the terminal, he spotted the first officer waiting near the gate. "You okay?" the first officer asked. "I will be," Marcus replied. They walked together in silence for a moment before the first officer spoke again. "You know, a lot of us saw how that was handled. People noticed." Marcus gave a small nod. "I hope so." That night, Marcus checked into his hotel room and sat on the edge of the bed, uniform still on. His phone buzzed, non-stop messages from colleagues, from friends, from pilots he barely knew. He didn't respond to most of them. He needed quiet. But one message made him pause. It was from his father. "Saw the video. Proud of you. You stood tall." Marcus closed his eyes. His father had been the first black mechanic at a small regional airline decades ago. He used to tell Marcus stories about being watched constantly, about mistakes being remembered longer, about excellence being expected but never trusted. "Fly clean," his father always said. "Give them nothing to use against you." Marcus had done exactly that. The next morning, the story broke online. Headlines twisted the narrative in familiar ways. Some called it a misunderstanding, others framed it as protocol confusion, but many told the truth. A black pilot falsely accused, authority questioned, accountability forced. Marcus watched the comments scroll past. Supportive messages mixed with doubt, praise tangled with skepticism. He didn't engage. He didn't need to. At the airline's headquarters, meetings were called, policies were reviewed, training modules rewritten, quiet acknowledgments made behind closed doors. The flight attendant was placed on unpaid leave pending investigation. The report was officially classified as unfounded. Marcus was asked to give a statement. He did, not with anger, Not with blame, with precision. He detailed timelines, procedures, logs, voice recordings. He spoke about tone, about escalation, about how power behaves when it goes unchecked. Some people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Good, he thought. Weeks passed. Marcus returned to flying. Different routes, different crews, same skies. But something had changed. Colleagues looked at him differently now. Not with doubt, with awareness. One afternoon, a young black trainee approached him in the terminal. "Captain Reed?" she asked nervously. "Yes, I just wanted to say, seeing what happened to you made me feel less crazy," she said. "Like maybe it's not all in my head." Marcus studied her face, the hesitation, the hope, the fear of saying too much. "It's not in your head," he said, "and you belong here." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded quickly and walked away. That moment stayed with him longer than the applause. Months later, Marcus stood in a conference room addressing a group of new pilots. Diversity training, they called it. A boxed check, a requirement to fulfill. Marcus spoke anyway. He talked about responsibility, about integrity, about the difference between authority and arrogance, about how silence can feel safe until it becomes permission. No one interrupted him. When the session ended, the room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Then someone clapped. Others followed. Marcus stepped outside afterward, the sun warm on his face, aircraft engines roaring in the distance. He looked up as a plane lifted into the sky, steady and sure. He thought about that night, about how easily everything could have gone differently if no one had questioned the accusation, if he had stayed silent, if the passengers had looked away. He knew this wouldn't be the last time something like this happened. Not to him, not to someone else. But he also knew this. Truth has weight, and when enough people refuse to let it be ignored, it changes the direction of things. Marcus adjusted his cap, squared his shoulders, and walked back toward the terminal, ready for the next flight, the next test, the next moment where standing firm mattered more than staying comfortable. Because some lies are meant to be challenged, and some flights don't just carry passengers, they carry accountability.